We're still missing a couple, but I'd like to get started. So like I said last week, every session is going to have 3 components to it. The first component is always going to be we're going to touch on one of the organizational behavior concepts in that model. Today it's going to be job performance. And then we're going to also do things, activities, talk about leadership, and do things related to and talk about team building. All elements of successful organizations, like Zappos that we saw last week. But I did want to get started today first off. As I went to, I was following your discussions in the forums and watching the processes you were using in developing your team names. So it was kind of neat. So I was eavesdropping on your discussions. But it was neat to see how these ideas evolved. So I want you guys, and it doesn't, not formally, but if somebody from your team wants to talk about your team name, the core values that went into it, and how you came up with it, basically. So anybody can go first. So.
We'll go first.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so I just find our core values. So our core values were. I know they were challenge, family-oriented, happiness, unique, and growth. So one of our team members who isn't here today, she found out that the word dragonfly symbolizes that challenge and change of the team will be facing some change, which will most likely come with challenges. So we really like the idea that our group is going to grow this semester through challenge. And then the word devoted comes from our commitment to this class and each other.
Fabulous. Okay. And actually, the core values, the common ones that you identified, can you throw them up on the board here? That's the other thing. Sure. Somebody from each team could throw your core values up that you identified, your common values up here. And then if you, as teams come up, if there are ones up there that are yours already, just put a check mark next to it. Because I want to start seeing, in addition to the synergy amongst your teams, I want to see what kind of synergy can develop in this classroom based upon all of our common core values. And I'll tell you why after we're done. So, okay, how about you guys?
So our team name is Cahoots. After looking with at thesauruses for the word together, because we're thought of the word together. Cahoots came up as one of them, which means to work together or.
Yeah, you're in cahoots with each other. Yeah, absolutely.
Our values were hard work, growth, and support, and so I guess they were more mentality of working together, doing things together. So
okay.
We kind of went off the word.
Okay, yeah, if you can throw your values up there. Cool. I'm liking what I'm hearing. Okay, who wants to go next?
So our team name is Erudite. I don't know if anybody follows or read the Divergent series. Well, they are a faction in the book, and the Erudites value knowledge, and they're very analytical. And they are also the bad guys in the book, but we're just going to disregard that.
And that's okay, because the word erudite in and of itself, and if you've ever heard it, when we're going to bring an erudite on the program, it usually means somebody who is well versed in a field, right. Who's recognized as an expert in a specific area. So by the end of this course, you'll have a lot of erudition in organizational behavior. How's that?
So our core values were hard work, ambition, and honesty.
Great. Okay.
Okay, so we chose the Fab Five because we kind of had. Okay, it works still a couple ways. There's 5 of us. We have 5 core values that we kind of agreed upon.
Okay, I see a theme emerging.
Yeah. So then the 5 are family-oriented, teamwork, understanding, hard work, and then fun. So the fun kind of ties into it.
There you go. Very good. Okay, yeah, if you can fill those over there. Check marks. I like that hard work is being repeated. So that means I can give you guys lots and lots of work, right? No? Okay.
Well, we chose 4.
And that's cool. That's okay. You
But
have some like-minded thinking.
we have 4 of us, obviously, but then we also it's an analogy. So we have an analogy for our FAB. So we have family, ambitious, and then boldness.
Oh, okay.
Which is 3 of our 5 values that we chose.
What was that? Okay, family.
Family, it was
Ambition.
family oriented, but we just.
Oh, yeah, that's my family, ambition, and.
And boldness, and
Oh,
then we
okay.
also had hard work and, making a difference for our lives.
I like all of them a lot. Very cool. All right. So we have a family-oriented, hardworking. Let's see what else we got. Oh, wait till you're done. Okay. So did you guys find that it was fairly easy? At least I could kind of glean that from discussions to come together based upon your core values to identify or come up with your team name? Okay. So that's kind of like the very like simple version of beginning to build a culture. Obviously in an organization it's much larger scale and it would take a lot longer to bring groups of people together. But one of the things I like to do in this class is to try to mimic what would happen in an ideal organization where culture building is concerned. Okay, building synergy. So, in looking at this classroom, let's say that you guys were individual departments in an organization. So you are learning to work as teams within your departments, culture building, and that began by identifying some common values amongst yourselves. Now from there, taking that to the next step is trying to build something called synergy amongst all of us, okay? And I'm going to talk more about what actually synergy is in a little bit, but that will allow us to work cross-functionally later on this semester when, I should say probably beginning the middle of the semester when we work on our project, which I will also talk about a little bit later. So I want you to think about, when we talk about culture, like I said, you're starting to build these little cultures in your teams. What kind of culture, what kind of atmosphere do you want to be in this classroom? Okay, so we have hard work, and actually these two kind of go hand in hand. Okay, because hard work presents challenges, and if you commit yourself to hard work, you're going to experience growth. So I see a lot of common values in here that, to me, tell me that you ladies aren't afraid to try things new, that you're committed to yourselves, and your family, which again usually go hand in hand. So I want you to think about, so obviously our common goals, and reading some of the goals you have in common in discussion forums, were, in general, what you really want to get out of this class. I mean, it looks like each and every one of you has a goal to really get as much, I'm not even just talking about this class in particular, but in all your courses, that you really are putting yourself 100% committed into them to get the most you can out of them. Okay. So what kind of environment can we build in this classroom that can make that happen? And in a more, I guess, enjoyable way? What can enhance your learning? So I want you to think about that. So let's, thinking about Zappos last week, and you look at the culture they've built there, the environment it's produced. And part of that, in looking at the culture book online, there's a couple of things that really jumped out at me when I first looked at that culture book. When I first got it in the mail, I went through it. So what are some of the observations you guys had when you looked at that culture book? What did some of the things that jumped out at you about Zappos? Michelle?
They call it a Zappos family.
Okay, there you go. That was actually one of the big ones.
Yeah, like a family picnic I saw. And they do like holiday things, like I forget what the Santa one was for Christmas.
Oh, yep, I know what you're talking about.
But it just seemed
I can
very
see it.
family oriented.
Yes, absolutely. You can tell, and you'll usually find this in the most successful organizations, big or small, that their culture is so strong and leadership is so strong that they've been able to build an atmosphere of family. Which isn't an easy thing to do, because you think of when we talked about like the worst coworkers last week. I mean, that when all of you who had that worst coworker in your mind, I mean, when you think of family, do you think of that coworker? Probably not, right? Yeah, I know. So you don't think of them as a really horrible person to work with. But think about how much more pleasant, how much more you would enjoy your job if you felt like you were working with people that you were really connected to and you really liked, and there's lots of mutual respect. I mean, what a difference that would make. I mean, you look at those people from Zappos, and I know there's been criticism of them, people calling them a cult, and they're drinking purple Kool-Aid, and maybe they're smoking something during the day. I've read all kinds of comments on these different blogs because they can't believe that you can build a culture like that. You absolutely can. From the early to late 90s, I worked for a really terrific company in Waukesha. It's about 55 to 60 people, so not tiny, but not huge. And they managed to just build an incredible family culture. And part of what my observations were that factored into that is you knew that every single person in leadership, from the owners, to the owner's son and the VP, just really cared about you. They really cared about who you were, and not just like in a fake way. I've worked in places too where your boss could be very fake, like pat you on the back if you do something good, but you could tell it really wasn't sincere. He felt like he had to do it. But the owner would come in almost every Friday. He would come because he didn't really work full time. He was in his 70s then, but he had founded the company. And he would come with a big cooler on wheels, and he'd stop at everybody's office, open the cooler, and we call him Beer Friday. Not all of us drank beer, but he would just walk around the building and literally stop at everybody's office and desk and open the cooler and say, hey, have a beverage, take a break. You work hard, and usually he'd come around again and make another pass. The guys in the construction department usually always had 2 or 3. But that's not a criticism, that's because they work hard out in the sun. So they were more thirsty than the rest of us in the office. But to me, that spoke that, you're the owner of this company, you're incredibly rich, you don't even need to work. But yet you still come here every Friday afternoon and you haul this big cooler around the entire building, and just that little itty bitty, show of appreciation, like, yeah, this is, and little things like that just show that, wow, you guys really care, makes you feel more connected to the company. Okay, so again, how, thinking about this, kind of put on a managerial / leadership hat for a second. How can we achieve that kind of synergy and environment in this classroom? Think about that. And what I've done in prior classes, some of the teams had suggested that, we have some classes where we move all the dust and sit on the floor. They had actually told me to dress more casually, like wear jeans or shorts or something like that, which was cool. I'm fine with that. If you guys want me to dress more comfortably, I'm down with that. And then there was a couple, 3 semesters ago, some of the teams suggested we had like theme days where we all came in like our pajamas or something like that. And it was fun. I mean, it just made the atmosphere real comfortable, but it was something that they thought, because it has to come from your employees. And this, going back to that rule of 1/8 thing we talked about, if you're a manager or a leader, and you just like pick something, okay, I'm gonna have a picnic for my employees, that'll make them happy, rah rah. No, it's, get the employee feedback. Find out, what can I do to make your job more comfortable? We're gonna talk about task performance in a little bit, and that factors into it. What can you do to create an environment that's going to make job performance more meaningful to your employees? Okay, so let's see what we can, again, brainstorm. You don't have to do it right now, but if you guys have ideas that would make this learning environment more comfortable, be more conducive to you achieving your goals from this class, give that some thought, even if it's just reconfiguring how we have the classroom. It doesn't have to be, a big thing, but even just little things matter. So, again, start thinking about that, and if you have ideas, you can bring them up in class, you can bring them up in a discussion forum. however you would like to do that. So, okay, so moving on. We're talking about our teammates. Oh, do I have all those? I want to make sure I have all those right, the team. Do I have all those right? Okay. I want to make sure.
Did somebody get added to our team?
Oh, yeah. Marvelous.
Okay.
Yeah, because she was absent first class, so I had to add her. So, I don't think she's here. No. So for now, 'cause I did shoot off an email to her and I did not get a, last week when she wasn't here. I did not get a reply, so it's possible that she meant to drop the course and didn't, but I still want to put her somewhere for now, so. But that looks okay otherwise? I got everybody in the right spot? Okay, so then I'm gonna change this in Moodle to reflect your team names. Okay, so, oops. All right, so yeah, so we're gonna talk about job performance. I do want to real quickly show you that Japan Airlines video. It's really short, but again, in thinking about culture building, as it pertains to supporting job performance, I just think it's just a really great video. I mean, I kind of told you some of this stuff from it, but to see it in action, to see a CEO of an airline, it's just such a great example of what I believe to be strong leadership. So yeah, we're going to, again, talk about job performance, what leads to good job performance, why it's even important. So, then we're going to move into leadership. Particularly, today we're going to start off talking about myths of leadership. Everybody has a different definition of what leadership is. So I want to talk about that and do a little kind of assessment. And then we're going to talk about team building and communication processes. And then a team building exercise or game or whatever you call it. So, all right. So, I'm going to show you real quick that Japan Airlines video. And then again, as you're watching it, I want you to think about, again, what type of environment would be, what kind of culture in this classroom would create the best environment for, okay, so you guys know why I wouldn't just see that. Comments?
It reminds me of Undercover Boss.
Oh, yeah, great observation. Yeah, it just pops into the airplane and, Any other comments, feedback?
I like the fact that he makes it so that it's accessible to his employees.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I feel like it's not really fully about what was said, but my dad frequently flies with Japan Airlines.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah, frequently, and he's always said that best airline to fly with, just because of how much they love their job.
Oh, so yeah, now you can tell
Yeah.
why.
It,
Pretty
They
cool.
even showed it though, that this is why that they enjoy their job so much.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and you can see, we were talking about that rule of 1/8, between the link between people and profits. Yes.
I hear so many people saying oh, I just don't have a good boss. I just don't like my boss. That's why I'm leaving. I can't stand the management or the leadership. And I think even to a certain extent, we've all felt that. And
Sure.
we've all felt what it's like to have a good leader that actually listens to you and puts in the work and respects you and sees things from your point of view and how of a day and night difference it is. And I think that can really just make or break your company, because we've learned that bad employees can really just make your company just plummet. And so having good employees that actually want to be there not only helps your business, but it also will help you profit, because like she said, oh, that's the best airline that I've ever flown.
Mhm.
But it's because people actually want to be there.
Sure, absolutely. And it all comes down, down to, again, you think about the culture that Nishimatsu has built at Japan Airlines, or you think about the culture in any organization that you worked at or heard of, where the employees were, they are so miserable there. But, think about the reasons why. I had a student a couple semesters ago, when we having an open discussion like this, said, you know what? Now I understand why my mom is so miserable at work. I get so upset at her because she comes home every day and she complains about how horrible her job is, but I get it now. And I have more sympathy for my mom because it's not her fault. So it was just kind of like an aha moment that she has, like, yeah, I feel so guilty now that I've been just, like, Mom, stop complaining about your job, And she stopped actually saying that to her mom. I'm thinking to myself, so understanding organizational behavior actually improves your relationship with your mother. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, you think about, I have a family member who is a CEO of a company. I'm not going to tell you what company, so I want you to know who this person is. And it's interesting, we have these philosophical discussions about culture and organizational behavior. And he told me he was having trouble filling manufacturing jobs on this floor. And I had a friend who was laid off looking for a new job. I said, well, what do you pay? And he goes, well, we start our manufacturing floor employees at $14 an hour. And the reason I was started, number one, that's difficult work. Okay, $14 an hour, you can't really feed a family on $14 an hour. But he pays himself $475,000 a year. So he's making $475,000 a year, and yet he plays with manufacturing employees. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, brother, you don't know why you have such turnover in manufacturing? I can tell you a good place to start. Maybe cut your salary and pay your line guys more, But yeah, to me, that's kind of like the counterintuitive of Japan Airlines. And don't get me wrong, my little brother's a great guy. Really smart, very hardworking, but I don't think he gets it. His company's not in that rule of 1A because he has so much turnover, and you can tell that's a product of it. I don't think that his employees work as hard for him as they could, and I don't think he realizes how much money he could save. If you think about, we're going to play like a little game next week about what turnover actually, different things cost a company. But one of the things, and I think it's in chapter 1, that turnover, or like replacing employees, or retention, can cost a company anywhere between 250 to 700% of an employee's salary. So, for instance, just to use a very simple math analogy, let's say I make $10,000 a year and I leave, it'll cost that company at a minimum $25,000 to replace me. And that cost would usually go up depending upon the type of job. Usually when you get into replacing full positions that require lots of education, lots of training, orientation, then that cost goes up. Because if you think about how much money, time and money, a company spends to train an employee, not to mention what dollar amount can you put on the experience and time that you're spending at a company. That matters, that you're learning the systems and the processes. And that's you can't train that. You can give employees knowledge and you can put them in situations that can help them do their job better, but that experience as they stay with you, that has a value to it. So if you can get employees to stay and commit, we're going to get into organizational commitment next week, which is when we're going to do this little game, it can save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, literally. Because, even just the time alone to replace employees, it's very time consuming. And HR departments would prefer not to have to constantly fill positions, but, unfortunately, like I said, some people don't get it. So if you ever meet my little brother, please don't tell me I had this conversation. So, he's a great guy, he really is. I love my little brother, but I don't think he gets it. So, Big Sister's going to keep working on him. I'm going to work on him to increase those manufacturing job wages. So job performance. So that's one of the two outcomes we talked about last week. So going back to the organizational behavior model, which I hope is emblazoned in your head. If you're really, really committed to this class, go out and get a tattoo of the OB model. No, I'm kidding. But the individual outcomes of this model are, one of them is job performance, okay? So again, to kind of review, the culture and leadership and team building and communication are all meant to create all these mechanisms, satisfaction, reduce stress, motivation, all that, all in an effort to create high-performing, really committed employees. And so much so that it's a science. It's actually a science. Okay. So I'm going to give each of you guys a little survey. I'm going to kind of take a little deep dive into some of the things that go into, factor into good performance. But more importantly, understanding maybe why we might engage in certain behaviors in the workplace. You're welcome. This will take a few minutes. Looks like everybody's done. And did you total them up? So I'm not, you don't have to share the numbers, but I just want to kind of give you an idea of what.
Yes, are we doing all of them or just?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, do all 3 of them. So.
Like, are we supposed to, like?
Oh no, just individual. Yeah, for each individual page, just total. Yeah. So. Good question. Thank you. Okay, so I think political deviance is the first one, right? So let's talk about each of these. And again, they're just sort of self-assessments, but they're meant to kind of get you thinking about, you know, your role in the workplace and what might be contributing to certain behaviors. Okay, so when you're reading for today, it talked about counterproductive or citizenship behaviors, and this is what this sort of revolves around. Understanding and becoming aware of different behaviors that are taking place in the workplace, because that all factors into job performance. Okay, it all factors into how the degree to which we do our jobs well or not. So for the political deviance one, you know, 12 or above kind of indicates that perhaps there's, you know, there might be politically deviant behaviors that you're engaging in the workplace. But again, not saying that, oh, you're a bad person. Okay, not at all. Sometimes in workplaces, you start engaging in what are termed politically deviant behaviors because it's sort of a mechanism of like kind of watching out for yourself or kind of watching your back or saving your job or keeping things close to you. But that's usually a product of an environment. Like, for instance, if you withheld work-related information from a coworker, is that necessarily a bad thing? But think about it in the context of a given situation. It sounds like a horrible thing. However, if you don't trust that person, you know, to carry your lunchbox, I mean, are you going to give them information? But again, think about the environment. How many of you ever worked in an environment where there's just nobody trusts anybody? I mean, how horrible is that to work? I mean, just you're always feeling like you got to watch your back or somebody's going to talk about you. Do any of you want to share an example of that environment? Okay, then that's fine. That's totally fine. Michelle?
I don't know. I feel like it's very common in the service industry for in restaurants, because people are always just worried about for waitressing. You're worried about your own tips. You don't want to help anybody else, and that's really the only way that you make money is on your tips. So if you have to take time out of helping your tables, then you're risking your money.
Right, and there's almost a degree of unfairness. I think sometimes that factors into that. Am I right? Yes.
So I work at a supper club with my mom, and so my mom, I come home from work, and she's like, well, so-and-so told me you did this tonight, or you just seemed, so-and-so said you seemed I don't want to swear, but you seemed bitchy tonight.
Okay.
And that made me so upset that they wouldn't tell me about it, mention something to me. They would say something to my mom. So I totally anybody they would talk about my personal life with anybody like that.
Oh, see, there you go. Now, would you say, on a whole, I mean, in that workplace, everybody's kind of like that?
Yeah.
The whole workplace is like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes you wonder about how that environment got created, insofar as either the owners or leadership is concerned. Should I not eat there? No. Just kidding. I love supper clubs. Can I ask which one it is? 'Cause I love supper clubs.
Yeah, Silvercrest, it's up in Watoma, Wisconsin, so
Oh.
it's 2 hours away.
Okay.
But we have people come from all over.
Yeah, because my husband and I, depending upon if we're traveling the state, we'd like to hit a supper club if we're in there or softer.
So, no, it's good food, good service.
Do they make a good brandy old fashioned?
Yes.
Okay, I'm there. Yeah, that's kind of like a staple in a supper club, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, Silvercrest, I have to remember that. Yeah, think about, again, the environment. I mean, I gave you an example of a great company I worked for, and there's so many more reasons that was a great company, not just because their owner came around with alcoholic beverages on Friday. But I also worked for a company that, well, actually the owners are now in federal prison for at least the next 10 years. Yeah. Where I loved what I did. I was a corporate marketing director for a resort management company. I got to travel to the resorts, and I got to do a lot of really cool things. So I loved what I did. But as time went on and I worked there longer, I started to notice things happening. And without going into detail, what ended up being uncovered was that the owners were embezzling money, okay, which ended up being to the tune of anywhere between $3 and $4 million. But you could tell the environment was getting kind of, everybody was very like nervous all the time, and when I would go to the accounting department and ask for a copy of my department budget, it would always take a while. I said, well, I can't print that right. I'm like, okay, just that's not something in the computer you can print. So things started to like not get suspicious. Okay, put it that way. And I started asking some questions of certain people, like, you know, how come we can't afford to put postage in our meter? We just had a whole weekend of 100% occupancy, or just things like that. And they would look at me like, okay, I shouldn't ask that question. So, and like I said, it just wound up being a really uncomfortable situation. So it did get to the point where I started noticing things, but I wouldn't tell anybody because I didn't know how connected. I didn't really know who may have been involved with this. I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell so-and-so that there's no petty cash or whatever, that 1 month all the paychecks that we wrote to housekeeping employees bounced. It's like, I was scared. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Are the feds going to come in here and confiscate all the computers? I mean, I was really getting to that level of, oh my God, you know. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know how bad. But, I mean, actually, eventually, the Wisconsin Department of Justice did come in, but this was actually after I left, so dodged a bullet. I did not want to be associated with those people any longer. Playing a practical joke on someone at work. Now see, this one too I think is context. I used to work in an insurance company where we did that all the time. Just because we were just we were like a Zappos group. Well, we were just these silly, crazy people. So we were just having fun, and our branch manager was totally cool with us playing practical jokes. You know, as long as they were like harmless. Like one time we went around the whole office building, and you know how lobbies and off the elevator they have fake plants. Well, one of the guys went on vacation, so he came back, and every single plant that was in the office building was in his office. So he couldn't get, and that's harmless, right? Yeah, for the most part. But I think what they're talking about here is something like in a mean way, okay? So, has anybody ever played a practical joke on somebody at work?
I worked in construction office just as an office aide, but all the salesmen would like take, whenever they ran out of paper or ink, they'd go to the next office and take the ink from the printer and the paper.
Okay.
And they would just jump around like whoever was next.
Oh, okay, so it kind of got to be like a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, where we just, okay. So, a running joke, I guess they would call it, so. But when you get, start thinking about starting or continuing rumors, and blaming coworkers for mistakes, or failing to help a coworker, think about why the environment that would make you want to do something like that, or maybe not want to do, make you do something like that, because a lot of times people will do these things, but they don't really want to, but they really don't have a choice. They have to act in certain ways, because that's the culture that was built. Yes, right.
I feel like in some situations where, like, failing to help a coworker, the reason I have done it is just due to the fact that you've helped them so much already, where it's just like, you gotta have to do it yourself.
And then again, link that to leadership, though. Why does that condition exist? Because leadership is allowing it to continue to happen, and leaving it up to people like you to either help or provide. They're not providing enough support or resources or something.
Right.
A ball's getting dropped somewhere.
Or the person is just like, doesn't care to, do it themselves,
Yeah, and there's not the word. It doesn't care.
Yeah.
So that's a commitment thing. Again, thinking about where the environment of where you're working, if a person just doesn't care, you know, will do the bare minimum or just is asking for help all the time rather than trying to seek their own answers. You know, again, you know, and to some measure, there are employees that maybe just aren't a fit. Okay, and maybe it's not all blamed on leadership. There's a concept called person-organization fit, and we're going to do like a career kind of, not career, but a vocational sort of link thing to see exactly what type of culture you would most fit in as you know move on to looking for careers. But the concept of person-organization fit is about finding an organization with which you not only identify with their values, but you know what their mission is, what it is they do. Because not all of us really. I mean, I wouldn't want to like work in an automotive manufacturing plant. I'm just not interested in manufacturing. It's just me. So to put me in a job like that, and maybe if that's the case, maybe she's in a job that she just didn't really want to do anyways, and it's like, oh, I'm here, I'm just going to do the bare minimum to get by. That happens, okay? So it's not always leadership's fault, but leadership can certainly do something to make that condition a little better. Yes, Michelle?
I have a question regarding what she said. Can failing to help a coworker be like a form of leadership or like helping them be challenged?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I know what you mean. So, but see, I think the word failing is kind of the operative word here. So, not helping a coworker, feeling is sort of like, well, I'm walking away from you, you know, do it yourself. So I see what you're saying. So kind of empowering somebody to try to do it on their own.
If they choose not to do a certain task or something. Like the example I'm thinking of is I used to work at a root beer stand, so this one girl never wanted to make root beer floats, and she would always ask other people to do it. But she's never going to learn how unless she does it herself. You can only watch somebody so many times.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, because and that's a great point. I mean, think about the context of the situation. And this is not in a job situation, but I went to Atlanta for 2 weeks in July to take care of my granddaughter, and I left my husband behind. Never left him behind before. This was very maddening for him. We've been married 33 years. And he called me one night and said, I don't know how to defrost, because I froze a bunch of meals for him. I'm like, you just got to figure it out yourself. Like, I've never defrosted anything. There's a book. It's in the drawer. Figure it out. It's like, and I blamed myself. I'm like, no, yeah, I did create this condition. I should have, you know, at least taught him how to use the microwave or given him the book when I got the microwave. He really knew microwave. So here. Okay. The only is the reheat button because there's the automatic sensor, so that's like no-brainer. But he wanted to defrost. He was freaking out. But again, I didn't fail to help him. I just chose not to because it was better for him to learn it on his own. So yeah.
The reheat button on a microwave detects. Wow. You'll press it and it'll know.
Right, and the auto defrost, there wasn't auto defrost button, which if he had really looked at the keypad. But he got frustrated because he kept stopping to turn the food. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to know if he could just do it manually. Oh, okay. So it's like it keeps saying, it's stopping and it's blinking, turn. Yeah, I know. Okay, so the next one, is it helping or sportsmanship? Because mine are in a different order. What do we have? Sportsmanship. Okay, so again, so we talked about counterproductive behaviors, and now we're moving into citizenship behaviors. So, if we look about complaining about trivial matters. Okay, has anybody done that in the workplace? No. And don't be ashamed to say yes.
What was your question?
About complaining about trivial matters.
Oh, I
Okay. Yeah. And but I want you to think about why you do that. Okay. Why do you do that? Donna.
So for me and where I work at currently, like I said, I work with parents, and there's one particular one that tends to be like late, like every day, or won't show up at all. And so nobody else really likes to address it and say anything to him or to our boss about it. Mm-hmm. I'm very vocal because whenever he doesn't show up, that means I have to take his class. And then on top of that, he never has any work prepared for them. So there's, even if he's late.
He's just winging it.
Yeah, so even
Okay.
if he's late and not there, like everybody else pretty much has like a binder with like, okay, I have this for this time, this for this time, this for this time. So even though I may have not been in the class or been there to help them, if I go in there and pick up this binder and look through it, oh, this works. Okay, I can give them this, 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 and this. He doesn't even do that. So I go in there and I'm like, oh, okay, well, movie day, we're gonna watch a movie. You're gonna do your homework and we're gonna watch a movie because I have nothing for you to do. And I've had to go to my boss like, he doesn't have anything. Like, he's not doing his job. And then it got to a point that I was like, okay, forget it. I'll just do it. And here go a book. And there's so many things in here, and he still didn't even use any of the materials that I printed off.
That tells me two things. One, he doesn't care, and two, there's no accountability.
Yeah, and so like now, like my boss has like came cracking down because it was his first time being in his position last year. And so he was like still trying to fill it out, see how things are going to go. And he was like, yeah, we're not doing this. He's like, I'm doing warnings. And by the third one, he's going to be out. So I think he's not going to be there for much longer.
You know, and the worst part of a situation like that, and the thing that kept circling around in my head is the students involved, okay? And they're the ones that are kind of suffering, if you will,
Yeah.
because he's not really committed, doesn't sound like, to teaching. So unfortunately, you know, and I've seen, and I've actually had in the past, a long time ago, situations like that where there's a big difference between, you could tell the teacher that really cared and was super prepared, and then the one that just like threw everything together, and then let you out of class like 2 hours early or something like that. So, and that makes a difference. But again, you think about from a manager/leadership perspective, what accountability, what kind of, that's part of the culture too, there should be accountability, but what kind of culture. And again, going back to what we talked about, you know, in Riley's situation, and maybe he just doesn't belong in that role. Maybe he just needs to find a different role, because it doesn't sound like he's very committed to teaching, where quality of teaching doesn't really matter. So maybe he just needs to. It's not the place for him. That person to organization fit might not be there.
And like he has like a lot of personal stuff that goes on. And so,
Okay, so there might, yeah.
And so that's why my boss was giving him some leeway, because
Okay.
he's very understanding. And, you know, we have lives going on outside of things. Like me, I can call him like early in the morning before I have to be at work at 2 o'clock and say, hey, I have this major assignment due. I can't come in because I need to go and meet with my group. And he's like, okay, that's fine. And so he's very understanding, but he's like, I can only be understanding so much.
Right,
and he's
exactly,
like
yes.
completely exhausted the understanding.
Yeah, because where's the line? Where do you draw the line as an employer? With being understanding that people have personal lives and might have, I mean, we all had, you know, different things going on that might factor into how well we're doing at work. So it's important, you know, which is another reason why you kind of want to get to know your employees as well, so that they have the comfort level to come to you and let you know, hey, I've got this going on in my life, you know, so, you know, it might affect this, that, and then you can find a way to accommodate that. But when you get to that situation where, a potential situation where an employee might be abusing that, and maybe you might ask yourself, well, why is that happening? Okay, why does this person continue to sort of take advantage of or sort of abuse the accommodations that you're giving? Because that might be something too that, again, might be a product of the environment. Okay, maybe other employees in the past have done the same thing and sort of gotten away with it, if you will. But you know, thinking about how would you manage that? So in thinking about sportsmanship type behavior, you know, thinking about, okay, finding fault with what the organization is doing, that's a big one. I think it's kind of like the armchair quarterback thing. I will sit and listen to my husband on the phone with his friends on Sunday nights, analyzing the Packer game, you know, saying, oh, they should have done this and they should have done that. Well, actually, he was doing it last night after the Brewers game was over. So you tend to kind of sit back and identify things that an organization could be doing differently. Okay. So thinking about the organizations that you work for now or when you've worked for in the past, you know, think about things that you feel, and this is actually going to be, think something that you're going to do in our final class project, is identifying or making recommendations of what an organization can do better. But how often do we sit and think, oh, they should be doing this or they should be doing that? How many of you have ever thought that your organization, okay. Now, my follow-up question to that is, does your organization provide you a mechanism to share that with them?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? No. So that's really important. It is so, so, so important. Because if you think about how strong a culture can be, if you feel part of building that culture, if you really are invested in it, if you feel heard, I mean, that's very important. And you do that. Again, that's another tie in feeling connected to an organization. But if your leadership doesn't care about your feedback, that organization probably won't grow, and that organization will probably have a lot of turnover. Okay. Do you think Mr. Hashimoto listens to his employees? Probably. Well, he sits and has his lunch with them. I mean, I think that's very cool. So think about that. Again, from the employee perspective, but future managerial leadership role. What can you do to make your employees feel like they're heard? Okay. To really, honestly, sincerely entertain their suggestions. Okay. Yes, Riley.
When I worked in over the summer, I made a suggestion box, and it was used. I was like, okay, well, let me just put up a suggestion box because people kept coming to me with like this, and people used it, and I let it be anonymous, so they, and we were able to there were people that felt uncomfortable with one of the cooks, and they would write it down, and it gave me the ability to do things about things that were bothering people. So, I mean I don't know, it's just like a suggestion, people actually utilized it.
No, and that's great because your suggestion made it possible for people to have a voice.
Right.
And feel a little bit more like, hey, I actually maybe do matter here. So, and that's really important. That is really, really, really important. Let's see. Okay, so let's go on to helping. Okay. So again, we're thinking about these from the perspective of citizenship behaviors and counterproductive behaviors. Okay. With a goal towards minimizing or hopefully eliminating counterproductive behaviors and increasing citizenship behavior. So I volunteer to do things for my work group. I help orient new members of my work group. I attend functions that help my work group. So down the line, if you look at these job performance helping behaviors, so to what degree, let's say, okay, so I guess the average they say for this particular assessment, my glasses. All right. So 40 or greater means that you are very helping in the workplace. Okay. And again, these are numbers that the authors of these assessments kind of put as averages. So if you're below 40, you're not a bad person. Okay. Again, think about the environment in which you work. Think about the environment that you're going to create. One of the things, do you feel, for anybody that feels that they've engaged in a lot of these, do you feel it's because your organization sort of empowers you, gives you the freedom to help others? Adana? Oh, go ahead.
I just feel more inclined to because everyone has been the new person and everyone knows how it feels to be the new person.
Oh, sure, yeah,
It's not
absolutely.
the greatest of feelings ever. You have no idea what's going on. So I just kind of think back to the time I was the new person and didn't know what was going on, especially in volleyball, on my volleyball team. I remember being a freshman and having no idea what was going on. So you just want to help those people because you've been in their shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. Make them feel like they belong. Otherwise, they feel that timid kind of, yeah. I get it. Donna?
So I was very group oriented when I was working for TSA. You have to work in a group. And I ended up doing a lot of things that were not necessarily intern stuff, but they were grooming me, which also helped me help my other people, the other interns that were working with me. And it improved our crew tremendously. Like everybody like got into like, oh, we should be more, pay attention a little bit more to this and pay attention a little bit more to that. And everybody was like learning more and more and more. And I have like a lot of great stories and a lot of good takeaways from doing that.
Now, do you believe your organization's culture
Yeah,
supported
yeah,
that?
it supported
Okay.
that. Like for what I did was a summer program, and I met with the head person of TSA for General Mitchell, and we had lunch. We saw him like 5 times out of the whole summer that we were there. And he was
5
very-
times being good.
Yeah, 5
Okay,
times
okay,
being good.
all right.
Like they're always walking around. Everybody is like trying to give you like good information. They want you to learn. They try really hard to get to hire me at the end of it to like be a TSO.
Mhm.
But my guys doesn't fit with my school schedule. But it was like a really great work environment. Like everybody was happy to be at work. And it had something to say about like the people who was managing them.
Absolutely,
Everybody
yeah.
was happy to be at work. And even if there was like something bad that happened, it was never from a managerial perspective. It was always like TSA, they deal with the general public. You have people coming through here that don't understand like what's going on and why things are the way they are. I feel like if people read, they'll be so much better with coming through TSA. But they lack, I feel like they lack their common sense when they come through. So like there's more like public and them having issues versus managerial and like the employee.
Okay. But it does mean, I mean, leadership, I mean, insofar as enjoying your job. Absolutely. But creating an environment where people feel comfortable helping each other, where people feel empowered to make decisions. And especially where, if you're creating a culture where, and this is kind of the opposite of almost the political deviance thing, where you don't hesitate for a moment to share information with a coworker, where you don't feel like you're competing with a coworker, because that happens a lot. That sometimes people, there are workplaces or coworkers that maybe won't put as much time and effort into maybe training or helping an employee because I don't want that person to get more recognition than me or be perceived as being a better employee than me, so maybe I won't train them as good as I could. But conversely, think about how that would reflect on you as being a leader. Okay, if you train somebody or help somebody and they end up being just a stellar employee, that, you know, if you're in a workplace where they recognize that, and think about the leadership qualities that you would be exhibiting if that were the case. Now, again, thinking about cultures. Before we go on to task performance, why don't we take a break? Come back at 10:30? Is that enough time? 10:30 or thereabouts. If you come back at 10:31, I won't lock the door.
I'm trying.
So like, I need to look at it.
I lose weight when I'm in school. Like, I'm trying to.
That's what gives me a problem.
That's one thing I love about it. You know, from being like completely unbelievable.
It definitely is an experience.
Yeah.
And seeing like how they change so fast.
That's another thing about children is that it's so quick. Like every year, especially like from babies and toddlers.
And they honestly say that children like really are like geniuses. Like they have a lot of common sense. Like I didn't know, like I heard my daughter count before she knew. And not, she can have like a full-blown conversation with me. Versus like my friend has a son and his birthday is only 2 weeks after her.
Okay.
But so they're pretty much the same exact age. He doesn't talk at all.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
And she, you know, she can count to 10. She can say her ABCs.
That's wow. That is crazy, right? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
But honestly, I think that girls develop faster
yeah.
than boys do. Because like I have a 3-year-old cousin and she talks better than me. Like you can't make out what he says at all. What are you saying? And she can talk to you and, you know, and it just be like clear.
Your baby's that, she was turned 2 years, 2 months, and she just started walking. That's big. So it's funny to see her from crying, during crawl from walking. She's all over the place now. And like she wants to do it now. She can read, she knows her college, she can read, she can open the fridge, she doesn't have that. You know, she's like, yeah.
That's why I don't like it.
Yeah.
Because then she just likes to go in there and grab stuff.
She touched the right side?
That's a lot.
Every day she comes home, she's like, I want my bowl, give me my spoon. And then she's like, I want ice cream.
Oh, no.
Every day.
Give her a bowl.
She'll make a bigger mess though.
Oh, that's so true. Oh my God.
But you know what I was going to say when she mentioned her birthday? You remind me of the girl from Hunger Games.
Oh, yeah? Which one? Or the main girl?
I can't, no, not the main girl. Okay,
Oh,
the girl that died.
Yeah.
Just like her.
Yeah.
So we all had
When I
to.
saw her, I was like, that's a little mean.
Yes, ice cream.
And then,
So bad we went.
I went like a lot.
Oh my God, I was like,
Christine, and we would go to Jeffer Collab.
I don't feel like I
After
get like,
classes,
okay, that's
we
not
would
true, I
go.
do kind of get
And,
emotionally attached to movies, but like, I was sad.
I
I was just like, we're, you guys like really just
someone else.
feel her all like,
Someone was really
Yeah, I definitely get emotionally attached to it. That was definitely a sad part.
like, I'm
crying.
Like, why did she die?
I don't really want
have you guys
to.
ever seen?
Because that's what I would go to,
movie,
like,
Oh, that
Saturday.
room, like the room. Oh my God.
I think I read the
So,
book. Maybe in high school.
You may have.
yeah.
We went to the it's like basically
I think so.
down in Florida.
Oh, really?
I think he must have had like a heart attack or something. But Joel, like if I'm standing. And I was like, okay, but like, what happened though?
He had a child and they were confined.
That type of stuff actually really happens.
And boy, this movie is.
I'm not
Oh,
ready.
man.
Yeah, I'm
Dude,
doing
that,
that.
I was
I'd
like
like to
on the
think-
edge of my chair, like when she like, oh my God. I don't wanna like ruin it for you guys, but I was just.
I'm probably not gonna watch it.
I was like,
the only
Gotta get a play.
Yeah, they rolled him up and he's like,
Is that what you do?
in the back of the
Yeah,
truck. And then the second she like sees this guy,
Yeah,
my
watch
mom
this.
like,
I'm not
feels
like,
we're gonna
oh,
work,
yeah.
like you're gonna
I was
get
so
caught, you know.
There I go, last night, eat a bunch of ice cream.
Besides
I
one,
was
like,
like, I'm gonna get better, watch.
He was like 4 or 5.
Well, my throat doesn't hurt. But
And
no,
so
completely.
his
It's
mom
not
like
that.
wrapped him up in a,
Yeah. It's
But
great.
I think you have a social place
in a rug.
They pretended he was dead.
Did you have the right track? Exactly. I was on ski my face for like half an hour.
So
Yeah.
they
I was like getting my hair done, and I was like, that's how long it was just like, I don't know, like 30 to 40 minutes. I was like, perfect.
So yeah.
I just chatted with you, and I thought like, this is gonna help.
The guy that was like still raping her coming into the room. And she's like, he killed my baby, he's dead, this and that.
I love
And
that.
so she wrapped him up in a rug.
Yeah, I didn't even
And
have
she told him
to
like,
go.
she's gonna put you in the back of the truck, you're gonna go, you're gonna roll out. You're gonna roll out, jump out of the
Oh,
truck.
there was this girl.
You're gonna give somebody a stuff, you know?
She was a nice person.
Yeah.
Is
She was very nice. So she laid
And then he like rolls out of the truck, so everything is
She would just like be fake that she
and then he comes out and was just
My
like,
gosh,
blue
it's
sky,
like,
like,
creepy.
the acting is insane, like, the filming is insane, like, it is just a really well done movie, like, you have to, like.
You're just there to get to know people and help them know, like, what's he gonna, like, go on with your plan?
Yeah, I guess it'd be a really good.
Only because I like really.
That's so rude.
Yeah. I've been watching her for years. After like the she would only track and then she come in like so much. Especially in Wisconsin. Which is crazy to think about. My dad has always like reported some things. You know how to around it.
No, I know exactly. I know.
She was never really, you know, like, okay, you're gonna say that.
Yeah.
Are you like first time?
Yeah, people really
No,
are.
that's horrible.
Just to think like they had her, just like that. Like what would be a purpose if you not even make it live in a world for my whole life?
I had someone I hated so much. I had Rachel. She dated Spencer, Rachel and Lucas's brother.
Oh, I know you have
I hated her. We all did. We all hated her in the theater class. Like everybody had a lot, and everybody gave each other the answers for the
Yeah.
Yeah, she told us that we were all thinking we should have worked with him back. Yeah, we all did. And she's like, I know you guys all cheat, it's fine.
I'm so paranoid.
I'm paranoid now.
I'm so paranoid. I'm paying attention to everything.
That's one
I
thing that
avoid
I
other
really
people
love.
who cheat. I'm like, okay, fine, I understand. Like, so like, I legit never, ever did a work. Like, never.
Don't
I
text
tried to,
me,
yeah.
you know,
So then, like, we all had
doing
a,
something that's distracting you from.
what app was it? It was like Groupie or something.
You know,
Oh,
when they
Groupie
see
was the
that
best.
you're-
Yeah. When Groupie was the
Yeah,
best.
what's going on?
We all had to leave you except Rachel, like, a girl, because we were like, you're a snitch. And we all, like, I shared, like, the workbook answers.
I was sitting
and
at
every
the gas
time we
station.
took pictures of the workbook.
I was like gas station, my mom had like this number, and I never was a gas
We all
station.
cheated.
Like,
Oh,
I was
oh,
trained like
100%.
nonstop, like, but it was like 11 o'clock.
That's
My
all I
sister,
hear.
I know.
Oh, no, we all cheated.
and I'm just like, no, it's too late for the comments, so it's like, there was no spots on the computer, like at any of the class, they were all good. So I was like, I was gas station, but I was still seated. I didn't do it. And then all of a sudden, like, this is a gas station, when you decided to go, and then all of a sudden, the guy just comes in and kind of like blocks me. I was like, see, you gotta go sit in the gas station anymore. What is he doing? It's not my window was cracked.
No, we had to stop.
But it's like we made eye contact.
Aren't you looking at that this morning at that Morgan, Marvelous, or Marvelous Morgan?
Well, he actually walked around. Like, we were like,
I think that we're doing because that's what we were.
she was like, what are you doing?
Oh, she left us. Yeah, we all wanted to get Williams on her sweater, and she said, if you guys do that, you guys are not going to get sweaters. Like, why? We all went to me. I saw her do W last week. Yeah, she was so happy. Yeah, we did. I think no one else is there at all. So her sister, but also honestly, like her all of us did. And Miss Williams, all of us. Some of us.
It's a guidance thing.
Oh, her daughter is so cute. I met her when I was right.
Oh, no, it's like, silver screen.
Yeah, I found out about her. She got me in I would be scared. I'm so sorry. Breaking my heart.
So it's like you're alone, you know what I mean? Like, it's what I feel like, and like they get, because there was one situation where I didn't know what happened. My birthday. Yeah, it's now, like, we go outside and have cigarettes, right? You know? You know what I mean? All you have to do is break the window open. This is, I'm like, please, like, video glass. And it's like, back in the day, but I never think that that's not really in that situation. Like, I told my mom. She's like, give me your
Like any other
All right, I think we're all back, right? We're not missing anybody? We got everybody back? So I want to wrap up our conversation about job performance before we move into part 2, which is leadership. And just to kind of summarize, this little self-assessment we did. Again, it was just really to kind of make you a little bit aware of these types of behaviors in the workplace. What types of behaviors you've exhibited in the workplace. Again, not that you're good or bad people, you're all good people, but how much these behaviors are a product of environment. Okay. But particularly if you're thinking about why unethical behaviors might be taking place in the workplace. And usually, if you look at your organizational behavior model, one of the individual mechanisms is trust, justice, and ethics. Okay. You think about working in an environment where there's no trust. Why is that? Okay. For me, just looking back through experience, so many of the times I've witnessed behavior from leadership, people who were supposed to be, leading an organization I worked in, when they were driving a $150,000 car, but payroll checks bounce. Well, yeah. Do I trust leadership? No. Like, okay, what's going on here? Okay. Now, that's one example of seemingly unethical behavior that can create distrust or unethical behavior in the workplace. But think about your role in leadership. How might you be displaying certain behaviors that would make people trust you? Okay. Because that's and this is a good segue into leadership, but leadership is really example. It's not so much what you do, or I should say what you say, but what you're doing. That's really what leadership is. So I just want to have a real quick discussion now on performance. So in the reading, it talks about task performance. And there's 3 different types of task performance. And why is it important to know this? It's really important to know this because if you think about any job you've ever done, it fell into one of these categories. So, routine task performance is just what it says, routine. So it would be something like an assembly line worker who puts a widget in a hold every day. It's just expected. There's a pattern to it. There's really no change from what you're doing every day. A receptionist who answers the phone. Now, anybody that does a routine thing over and over and over again, okay, that's a job with routine task performance. Adaptive task performance, on the other hand, is you're in a position where your performance, you have to adapt to situations, okay? There may be some routine elements of your job. However, and here's a great example. My husband was a firefighter for 30 years. His job was really an adaptive task performance job because every day it could be different. He would have to respond to a fire or rescue call, or just different things affected what he had to do that day. So he had to adapt accordingly, okay? Another example that the book gave is, I remember the story about Captain Sully Sullenberg who had to land the plane on the Hudson, okay? That was a really adaptive task he had to do because he had to figure out a way to save 153 people from dying when his 2 engines in his plane go out. So he had to adapt and quickly think, because adaptive task performance sometimes require quick thinking to land that plane on the Hudson River, so all those people lived. So that's another example of adaptive task performance. So it requires some agility. Those are usually jobs that have like maybe some change to them that aren't really routine. And then there's creative task performance. So creative task performance is essentially, you kind of get, you're given a role, you're given a responsibility. Okay, like for me, okay, I'm given a role as an instructor here with a goal to, for instance, for this particular course, teach all of you about organizational behavior. Okay, but how I do that job is up to me. Okay, I'm not given a folder that says, okay, this is what you have to teach and this is how you have to teach it. I get to invent that on my own. So that's an example of creative task performance. And that's one of the things I love about my job. I can come up with anything, any elements I want to put curriculum together to deliver to students. Okay, so, and why is this even important to know? So let me ask you this, okay? Let's say you are this person that works in this factory that every single day, all you do is you put a widget in a hole for 8 hours, okay? How long are you gonna last in that job? Not very long, right, okay. Or even an adaptive task performance. If you don't like change, or if you sometimes would like something, to rely upon, okay. Do you want to work in a role where everything every day is completely different? I mean, everything, nonstop. I mean, some consistency sometimes is nice. Would you agree or not? Yeah. Okay, all right. Creative task performance is great too. I mean, but sometimes given some direction or some, okay, I'll be honest, there are some times when I'm in summer planning for fall, I'm trying to think of ideas. I like getting suggestions. I like getting, ideas from people. But creating a balance, okay, and this is the other reason why it's so important to know who your employees are and what they're doing. A lot of companies do job satisfaction surveys. I think the smartest companies do that to find out, okay, because you might think just by definition or by a title, receptionist, okay, oh, I know what she does. Or, assembly worker, oh, I know what that person does. Well, not always, so you don't know what that job is like, okay? Which is, again, the other thing I like about Japan Airlines CEO is that he takes the time to get to know what employees are doing so he can fully understand, or to the best he can, what each of them is doing to try to make their jobs better. So wouldn't it be great, okay, let's say you are this assembly line worker, you're putting in a widget in a hole every single day, if you also got to do maybe something else, okay, maybe you have all these, widget pluggers in your manufacturing floor, but giving them something else to do, or which is the other great thing about cross-training. So if you're cross-training your manufacturing employees, you can move them around to different roles. Well, wouldn't it be nice that you guys do to kind of break up your day? I don't have to put widgets in holes today. I get to go do something else, just to kind of mix things up. Okay, how much happier is that employee going to be? Okay. And that one little thing makes a difference. So taking the time, again, like in this situation, this example, cross-training people to do different jobs, gives them some flexibility. It also gives you a more agile workforce. So if somebody calls in sick, you can easily slide somebody in who knows the job. So think about the benefits of investing the time and money to do that. So again, managing balance, plus making that job satisfaction really equals better performance, because you will be a better performing employee, particularly from a routine task performance, because if you are doing something that's just widget hole, widget hole. You kind of start doing it unconsciously, so you're really paying attention. So if there's some measure of quality that's supposed to take place, might that maybe decrease because you're just kind of, you're getting to a point where you just don't care anymore. It's like you're just doing it. So that factors into performance as well. So when you're, again, when you're managing a department or an entire organization, paying attention to what types of tasks people have to do to create some balance in their jobs, make them more interesting and fulfilling, really makes a difference in how well they're going to perform their jobs. Okay. So we're going to move on to leadership. I want to show you this video. It's funny. I hope you find it funny. Because when I do leadership presentations, again, like I mentioned earlier, everybody has a different concept of what leadership is, okay? Everybody has a different concept of what leadership development is. I mean, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of books out there on how to develop as a leader, okay? And I'm not saying that one is better than another, but when you think about leadership and what it involves, I think the concepts or the concept of leadership development, that makes the most sense. It's about building yourself first, starting there, okay? So let's watch this, and then let's talk about leadership development.
The great Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "Leadership is what separates us from the animals. To be human is to be a leader. If you've never been a leader, you've never really been human, and there's no point to your life." Have you liked that video?
Okay, that's your Thursday chuckle. No. The reason I like to show that is because it talks about what leadership to me is not. Okay, and just from the leadership research I've done and the leadership classes I've taught, there's several things. First of all, leadership is not about authority. Okay, so just because somebody may have a higher position than you in a company, perhaps, does not necessarily mean they're a good leader. Okay. Leadership is not about personal success. So you can make thousands or millions of dollars a year, does not necessarily mean that you're going to be a great leader. You see all kinds of people out there that do motivational speaking and so forth, and they're very successful. But does that automatically qualify them as a good leader? Not necessarily. I mean, a lot of them are. Or being outgoing. There is a big misconception out there. God bless you. And I have had students complete surveys for many semesters insofar as asking them, do you think you're a good leader? And why or why not? So many of them say, because I'm too shy. Or I'm just not outgoing enough. And it has nothing to do with being a good leader. Absolutely nothing at all. Okay, so if that's something that you used to think, get that out of your head. Get that notion out of your head. Because I think I mentioned this last week. Some of the best leaders ever throughout history were really not outgoing. We're really not really actually good public speakers necessarily. We're maybe afraid of public speaking, actually. Back in the 70s, our Secretary of State back then was Henry Kissinger, and the reason I even thought of that is because he spoke at Senator John McCain's funeral last week. Wonderful example of world leadership. Hated public speaking, hated it. Just really nervous about it all the time. So you think of a public figure, especially a prominent political figure, that they all like to talk, not necessarily, and there's a lot of people actually in Congress and in the Senate that don't necessarily like public speaking, but they're there because they want to lead. They want to represent people. Okay. So those three things right there, again, get them out of your head. Nothing to do with good leadership. There we go. Okay. So there's four main differences between managing and leading. Okay. And if you want to download this PowerPoint, again, it's always available on Moodle. Okay. So when you're a good leader, you create value versus counting value. And what that really means, okay, how many of you have ever heard of and or had a micromanager? Okay, oh yeah, me too. Where they just manage every single little detail about your job rather than doing their own. Okay, that's counting value. Where they're looking at, if you're in a sales capacity, if you had ever had a sales manager, and all they do is they're counting numbers. Okay, are we going to meet quota? Are we going to meet quota? That's a manager. Okay, leaders create value. Okay, so really what that, I mean, if you think about it, what that means is they do a lot of the things that we talk about, and we're going to continue to talk about in the organizational behavior model, like making sure employees are satisfied, making sure that they have the resources that they need to do their job, making feel that they feel supported, creating great culture. And one of the products of that is that, there's that word synergy. I told you about, okay. So if you can create a culture in an organization where people just work together so well, where sometimes maybe they work together so well that they can just can communicate without words sometimes, where they finish each other's sentences, that's synergy, okay? And which is the same as there's a term in the book called process gain. And all that really means is, okay, this is the definition of process gain. When the sum of different parts is greater than the whole. I know that sounds confusing, but I'm going to give you an example of it, okay? So, Fab 5. They're my manufacturing department, okay? So each of you has to produce 25 widgets every week. Okay, that's it. I said, I want you to produce 125 widgets every week. That's your goal. I want you to do that, okay? But I never really took the time to train them well. I never took the time to really have them develop as a team, get to know each other, develop any type of connection. So they each individually get their 25 widgets done at the end of every week, okay? So I'm counting value. I'm just making sure they're meeting that goal, okay? Now, what a leader does is, okay, you guys need to produce 125 widgets as a group, okay? And I've trained you properly. I've given you all the resources you need. I've gotten your feedback on how to, maybe you have some ideas how to make the processes more efficient. But I leave it to you guys, like a creative task process, okay? Or creative task performance. So, you guys have developed this synergy, you've worked it together as a team, you've come up with different ways, I've empowered you to find a way to meet that goal. And at the end of the week, you've made 200 widgets. Okay, that's process gain. Does that make sense to everybody? That is process gain. So by creating that synergy, by empowering them, by training them well, by creating that environment where they all work together so well, they're actually able to exceed a goal and realize a greater sum than their individual parts. Okay, synergy. And that's what the best leaders do, is they are able to create this, it's actually like an invisible energy, okay? Where, again, if you allow people to come up with their own processes, because they're the ones, I don't work with them, I don't know what's going on, and somebody might have a skill that's better than, or maybe a little bit better than somebody else, but finding ways to work together and complement each other can be very powerful in the workplace. And it's also known as action-based leadership. But the term that we're going to use throughout this semester is self-leadership. And by the way, the end of that video, that Lao Tzu did not say that. What Lao Tzu said was, and I think I said this to you last week, in order to lead others, you must first be able to lead yourself. Okay, that's self-leadership, or action-based leadership. So the difference between managing and leading, number 2. Managers have subordinates, leaders have followers. I want you to think about that, okay? So the difference is circles of power versus circles of influence, okay? So how many of you are on LinkedIn? Okay, so, and you've seen people on LinkedIn and you kind of see how many connections they have, okay? Do you think necessarily if they have 700 or 800 or 1,000 connections that they're a good leader? Not necessarily. They might be a great manager. They definitely are active on LinkedIn. That's for sure. But I think about circles of influence. Okay, so that's a circle of power. You have all these people that you know, or seemingly know. But if you're a great leader, you have circles of influence. Those are the people that everybody goes to for advice. Even just ask a question, okay? Think about that. And especially people who aren't necessarily, people in an organization, if they're like, I always hate using the term below you, will normally come to you to ask questions, but if people above you in the hierarchy come to you, then you are operating in a circle of influence. Yes?
So does the circle of influence, like, you yourself are the circle, or like you have a circle?
You are the center of that circle.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of like your own personal stakeholder model. So in 100, you should have talked about stakeholder models, I hope. At least some of you did. Okay. So essentially what that means, okay, the stakeholder model is at the center is the organization, and then around that circle is everybody that's impacted by you being in existence as an organization. We're going to actually build a personal stakeholder model when we have our self-leadership workshop. So if you think about, if you have a powerful circle of influence, think of yourself in that stakeholder model, which you in the center and all around the circle is all your stakeholders, family, friends, peers, co-workers, okay? Everybody that you actually have any connection to or where your existence impacts them in some way, okay? So think of that, think about your circle of influence and how you might grow that circle of influence. Okay, so then there's managing work versus leading people. And this is kind of the same, or there's similarities between counting value and creating value. But even more so, if you can inspire people to do things rather than forcing them to do it, if you don't get that done by next week, I'm going to fail all of you. That's fear. That's fear-based leadership, okay? That doesn't really inspiring you, to do something. So that's the difference between managing work and leading people, okay? It's motivation versus manipulation. Yes, Riley?
So would you say one leading versus managing is more important? Or do you think there must be a balance between the two?
Well, I think to be the best manager you can, you have to be the best leader you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
because they do work together.
Right.
But in order to be the most effective manager, you really need to build your leadership skills.
Right.
Okay. So then the last one is the push versus pull theory. That actually, the difference between managing and leading can be described in the laws of physics. Okay. So there is a common misconception that it takes me more energy to do this, to push this away from me, than to pull it towards me, which is not true. Okay. Actually, where friction and resistance are concerned, pushing is more, harder. Okay. Why does this matter when it comes to leading versus managing? Well, if you think about it, managing people is a very overt process where you're giving people things to do. You're telling them what to do. Okay. You're trying to move things around. That's managing. Okay. Think about an organization that's like a chessboard. You've got these pieces. That's what managers do. They move things around the chessboard. Okay. But for leading, it's like drawing people to you, inspiring people. A lot of times the greatest leaders teach people how to do things through example. Just watching a great leader, you can learn how to do something just by watching them and listening to them. Okay, so that's the difference. That's what they call the push versus the pull, where you can actually explain the difference between managing and leading with physics. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So the definition of leadership really is, it's just a process of influence, for good or bad, okay? Because if you think about any leader you've ever had, a good leader or a not so good leader, but at the end of the day, what they're doing is they're just influencing you in some way. They're either influencing you to act in a certain way, influencing you to do something, behave in a certain manner. It's just a process of influence, okay? And it begins, self-leadership says, that in order to influence, you have to begin with influencing yourself. Okay? And what that really requires, and what we're really going to get down into the details of doing in a few weeks is becoming more self-aware. Okay, tying things that happen to us every day to our behaviors. So here's another thing that is from Lao Tzu. Things are not happening to you, things are happening because of you. I want you to think about that. That's really one of the tenets of self-leadership. Things are not happening to you. Oh, my sons hate hearing this, I say this all the time. But they're happening because of you. And it can be very empowering to really start to understand and make connections between things that we're doing and things that are happening. Because it actually creates more control over our lives, okay? So, again, that's just kind of like, we're skimming the surface of what we're really going to get into in a few weeks. So when in thinking about leadership coming from within, there's this really great TED Talk speaker named Drew Dudley. He's funny, very lighthearted. So before we do, talk about team building, I want to watch just one more video. And it really, here are a couple of the main points I would like for you to glean from this video. Again, about powers of observation, okay, and observing things you do and the potential results. We can't always see the eventual consequences of something that we're going to do, but sometimes we can infer or have a pretty good guess, okay? But even just thinking about our actions before we engage in them and thinking what could result from them makes a huge difference. So let's watch this real quick. Oh, let me pause the video again.